This is an introduction to the second of three duty assignments that I had in Vietnam. This one is going to be on the TRANG. The TRANG is, and remains a beautiful resort down on the beach in the South China Sea. It's about an hour's flight north of Saigon. Things in those days were measured in not so much in miles and clicks and kilometers rather, and so on, but in terms of how long it took you to fly from point A to point B. So that's where Nha Trang was, a beautiful place. And I lived in Nha Trang when I took over as head of intelligence for psychological operations for 2 Corps on December 1st of 1967. It's maybe about 2 months before Tet, and I remained there until it was close to the time when I would be coming back to the United States. And as I was becoming short, as they would say, I was approached to see if I would take over and remain in Vietnam and shepherd essentially a civilian project, embassy project, which was the development of a cultural magazine called Tong Cam. All they had at that time, by June of 1968, was a name, Tong Cam, Thong, second word, CAM, com, and that meant mutual understanding in Vietnamese. And they were looking for somebody who could fast track it, get it up to 10,000 quickly within a couple of months, and then on up to, and in Saigon 10,000, and then go up to 135,000 within 6 months or so. And they were willing to put all kinds of money behind that. And so I remained in Vietnam to do that project, which was the better part of another year or so. I traveled in and out of Vietnam quite a lot during that latter period. But we're going to talk about now, and it's going to be several takes on Nha Trang, where I came in from the field. I was out with the 101st and the 2nd of the 7th 1st Emerald Cav, the Gary Owen Brigade. And I'd been there since August of 1967 and to the last day of November of 1967, running a field team of 5 guys, counting me. We had audio visual. We had a couple of airplanes that were flying every day, and dropping leaflets and broadcasting, blah, 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 all kinds of stuff that we did down there. What happened was the 245th Psychological Operations Company, which was part of the 8th Battalion, I think, in Saigon. Anyway, the 245th, which was based in Nha Trang, and we were a field team for that down in Phan Thiet when I was there from August 67 to December 1st, became a battalion. They were upgraded, everything. So the battalion down in Saigon became the 4th Psychological Operations Group, and the 245th Psychological Operations Company became the 8th Battalion. And when they became a battalion, they needed an S1 who was, and S2 was intelligence, S3 was the operations, S1 I think was personnel, and S4 was supply. So I was brought back into the Trang to take over and develop and make this psychological operations intelligence division with, I think I had 4 guys, and we were supposed to handle those duties, which by the way, there were four core groups, 1, 2, 3, and 4. the division of Vietnam was into 4 military groups. I Corps was up by the DMZ, and that was primarily, when I was there, that was the Marines. And then you had 2 Corps, which is where we were down in the TRANG and so on. And that was by far geographically the largest of the 4. 3 Corps was down around Saigon in that area, and 4 Corps was the Delta, which was a whole different operation. It's marshy and all that. And so what was the TRANG like when I got there? Well, our initial operations were in a Quonset hut. We're in the back of this Quonset hut. Not very much security there. And I had a sergeant and probably an EM, and this sergeant, he was short. He was getting ready to go home. And this guy really hated me. He hated officers. He was sort of dutiful in the way that and respectful in the way you have to be respectful to an officer, kind of thing. But he's really going mostly. But because we were growing and we were getting a lot more people, rather quickly, we were given and remodeled the old mess hall, which is a rather large building, and we moved out of the dirt open Quonset hut rather quickly and over into what were really secure and quite more substantial building, and in that building we were given we had our small tidy little office with our desks and our enlisted guys, and no windows, but we had an air conditioner. It's unbelievable. We had an air conditioner. And nobody else had that. Nobody had an air conditioner. We had an air conditioner. And had a Jeep. And I lived, my men lived on Camp McDermott, not far from probably walked over in the morning to work. But I lived on down the beach, and I lived down in the TRANG itself, on just a residential street halfway down this dirt street at 8 Meilin, MELINH, Duong means street. And we had they had room for 6 officers there, and I staked out my place in the back of the villa, which is really kind of 2 buildings, although they kind of wouldn't know it. And I was upstairs and in the back, and I actually had a shower, and I could take a shower there, but the water was off of a cistern that was on the roof, and it was really cold. And that's where that's where I spent my time in those were my quarters while I was in as the S2 intelligence officer in the TRANG. I had been in the field. When I had been in the field, I had been had a bunk, really, a bed in another house elsewhere. My fellow officers there were all lieutenants. There was one other captain, and he was a judge general, and he lived on the first floor in the back, and he pretty much drank and was pretty much drunk all the time. And we had the other fellows who were there, and I won't go through them. Some were worthy of more respect than others, let's just say. But we were all there. We also had a guard. The front of the house was a very, very narrow. It was probably no more than about 10 feet or so between the front of the house and the wall, which had barbed wire on the top of a little gate. I would drive my Jeep through that gate and park it inside the in that little area. So maybe it was more than 10 feet, but it couldn't have been much more than that. But the length of the house. And we had a guard who was there at night, supposedly to keep us, I don't know, safe, of course. But on the on the day when the great fighting began at Tet, which was so 29th, 30th or so of January 1968, the guard didn't show up that day, and I mean, clearly he knew something was going to happen, and I think I've said this before. I have no problem with that. He belonged with his family, and he belonged to preserve himself. We also had a mama-san who would come in, and she would clean up, and she would do our uniforms and kind of take care of all the kind of the house care duties. And there was a little stoop in the back, which was maybe 6 inches high, and she'd put the water in there, and she kind of soap. And finding soap to wash our uniforms was well nigh impossible, except one day the commissary got a shipment of soap, and we got a case of liquid soap. And a case of liquid soap meant we're never going to have to grub around looking for soap ever again. And so anyway, I came home, maybe somebody else did, in the middle of the day one day, and we found about 3 or 4 empty soap bottles, because they were bottles of soap. They were liquid, and you go, oh my God, what's going on? So you went out in the back, and there was Mama-san. You had bubbles everywhere, and you had Baby San, and Baby San was having a wonderful time, and all the soap and so forth, and she was using 1 bottle a day to wash our uniforms and so forth. And so well, here's what you do, Mama-san. We got it kind of straightened out. But then I think, as I recall, a day or two later, it was raining, and I'm walking somewhere, and these jungle fatigues were very light, and they were green, and I remember it started raining, and to get the rain off, and as I put the rain off, the uniform turned white. It was super saturated with soap. I love it. The other thing, we had a refrigerator. We pretty well lived a good life. I mean, it was kind of an 8 to 5 kind of life. Go in the morning, run my intelligence section, such as it was, and usually lunch over at the Officers Club, which was next door at the Air Force Base. And we'd have dinner over there and kind of drink a little bit. When it gets sort of dark in the evening, we'd clip-clop on back home, and it was peaceful. And there was peaceful. And there was also you could go down to the beach, and you could live down and, swim around. And the South China Sea was very high salinity. You could just float on top of it. And there were these little restaurants up and down the beach, and some of them had little restaurants that you could kind of walk-in things. And then the main big restaurant was a French place called La Fregat's, and Fregat's was just a great restaurant. Fregat himself had come out during the Viet Minh days, which is prior to 1954, and he'd settled in and opened his restaurant, and I don't know his background, but I know that, he just great. And this is where I first was introduced to prawns, which are these giant shrimp, and it's great. And of course, they just grab them out of the ocean there, and so on. And so it was a comfortable, good life. And then, I don't know, a few days before Tet, things were changing. Kids would throw a rock in the back of your truck for the guys were going along, and you'd think, my God, they thrown in a grenade, which they hadn't. But it became a little less shaky. And then we all went to Eat It Forgots one night. And we all got sick. And the joke was, Forgot had gone over to the other side. Well, during Ted, Forgots was absolutely decimated, shot up, closed. I don't think it ever reopened, at least within my memory. I'm going to tell one last story, though. A fellow showed up at our company and became the XO. And this was not a guy who fit in at all with our unit and so on. And he was only a major, only he'd been out in Vietnam since the French Paris Accords in 1954. Now, remember, we're in 1968 here. So this guy's an old Vietnam hand. And whatever he wasn't just a major. And he was placed in our unit as XO, executive officer, for a reason, and he only was there for about 2 or 3 weeks. But one day, he says to me, come on, let's ride down to Cameron Bay. Let's take a ride the country. I said, yeah. He said, I'll find out, but come on, be my driver. We'll tell you some stories, and we'll just get to know one another a little bit better, which we did. And as we're going along, a time or two, he'd say, just stop here. Just stop. He said, I'm going to go in the woods and drive on down a mile or so and wait for me down there. So I'd drive on down, and he'd come out of the woods and climb in. He said, it's all quiet, nothing's fine. And we wouldn't go down. Now, we were on, I think we're on Highway 1. And I've already told the story that the thought was that they would load General Westmoreland and our ambassador, and the guys would start out from Da Nang on Christmas Day, and they would, with the press, they would drive from Da Nang or somewhere up there, all the way down to Saigon, and declare that the war was over, we've won, and it's all over. And I've always thought that my ride with the major, who was hardly a major, was the reconnoitering to see whether everything was secure in that stretch from the TRANG on down to Cameron Bay. I believe that then, and I believe that now as well. He was easily one of the most interesting guys I ever met during the war, and he was clearly not. And admittedly, to me, he was not the XO of this unit. We're going to tell a lot of the TRANG stories as it goes along. Did a lot of stuff there. Traveled around. We had a unit up in Pleiku. I had been, I guess I would call it, I was offered to go up to Pleiku and take over our unit, which was a company-sized unit once we were a battalion. Go up and run that unit in the Central Highlands at Pleiku. Really didn't want to do that. So they sent somebody else up there to do it, a fellow by the name of Slick. And there was another fellow up there who we'll probably tell the story about sometime, and his name I know, but I'm not going to use names here as well. So we've got Pleiku stories, and we've got some stories about Dragon Mountain, where the 4th Infantry Division was, about 10 miles south of Pleiku. And our radio station was up there with our good friend, still always good friend, Lawrence Barber, and I've had Larry already do a take here on our radio station in Pleiku and so on. So we were involved in a lot of stuff, and we were busy in psychological operations during that time, and we'll be telling. Well, hell, we're going to tell all the stories that we can remember. Yeah, it's been 57 years now since then. And we will continue with our take on the TRANG. But this is the first take, kind of introductory. And then we'll go from here.